Hello and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Tuesday, May 20th. I'm your host, Jake Daly. As always, got a good show for you today. First, we're going to touch on this potential college football commission incoming. Going to touch on the CEO role, kind of what it sounds like this new CEO of this commission could be in charge of. Gonna go over that. Also, gonna look at, could USC Notre Dame actually be ending after almost 100 years? It seems like that series may be coming to an end. We're also gonna dive into some potential breakout players for 2025. Make sure you stick around for my continuation of my SEC rankings as well. But before I do anything else, I want to remind everybody, this show is all about you. We love hearing your comments, your questions, your insights, your opinions, your hot takes, whatever you got. We want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. Now, one easy way to do that, if you're on YouTube, you can use the Super Chat feature. To use the Super Chat feature, all you have to do is click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, type in your message there, and send that in. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, gets read live. It's also just a great way to support our channel, support what we're doing here at the GSMC Podcast Network. If Super Chat's not your thing, if you're not on YouTube, you can also go to gsmcpodcast.net to tip, comment, question, do anything there on that website, which is, again, gsmcpodcast.net. Now, big bombshell report came out from Pete Thamel last afternoon, over the College Football Commission, what this could look like. Reportedly, there's going to be an entire new body that's going to govern college football. And changes, they're obviously coming quickly right now. College sports still trying to be formalized, still kind of in this transition period, right, where there's not a whole lot that we know about the future. We don't know what's going to happen. Judge Claudia Wilken, her decision of the House settlement is still impending. We're still not really sure. So one key here is this potential college sports commission, which they're calling it, would be a new enforcement organization, but none of this can be legalized, finalized until that House settlement comes. So we're still waiting on that decision first and foremost. That's going to be the first domino to fall, but it seems like if that gets passed, if that's resolved, this is the next step. It seems as if this is going to be kind of the enforcement arm of college athletics, of college football in particular. We've kind of seen this. The NCAA, they've pretty much lost all power in terms of traditional enforcement. They haven't really been able to kind of enforce any of the penalties of any of these rule changes that have occurred. These violations, Tennessee, Michigan, those just in the past couple of years, they haven't really had a ton of punishments. The NCAA has kind of been handcuffed. So one of the goals here is bringing this new organization in and having a CEO in charge, which would have the final say in doling out punishments, deciding which rules have been violated according to the sources and according to the terms of this agreement that these schools might sign. So it's going to be kind of a level of singular power that has never existed throughout the NCAA's era of really struggling to enforce its rules, to hand out punishments for programs, universities that have violated particular sections of NCAA codes, laws, rules, whatever you want to call it. And so this is something that's expected to come pretty quickly after the House settlement kind of reaches its conclusion, after we learn that decision. If it's passed, if it's finalized, this is something that it sounds like has been in the works for a while. CEO's hire is going to be spearheaded by the Power Four commissioners, SEC, Big Ten, Big 12, ACC. Those four commissioners are really going to have the charge. They're going to have their pick to lead this new organization. It's quickly going to become one of the most influential, one of the most prominent positions of power we've seen in college athletics. And the hiring of this CEO has already been deep in the process, according to what sources told ESPN. The conducting of the search process kind of before the job can even officially be created is just indicative of how quickly this billion-dollar industry is going to have to transform again, pretty much overnight again, before games are played in August. This has to be done before the season starts. We need to know who's going to enforce these rules. If something happens during 2025 in which a university program violates specific rules, what's going to happen? Who's enforcing that? So these decisions all need to be made in the next couple of months. There's not a quick timeline for that. It kind of shows how quickly the entire industry is banking on this change, banking on this house settlement coming in. And this is going to be a position, it's going to be one of the faces of the new era. Sources have told ESPN to don't expect this person to be a household name to a lot of casual college football fans. Expect it to be somebody that comes from outside college athletics, kind of outside that realm. Somebody maybe in business, politics, something outside of the college football realm. I wouldn't think Nick Saban here. I wouldn't think a guy like Cody Campbell. I don't think that's probably the case. One name that I could see would be Condoleezza Rice. Think about it. She's been on the board of the College Football Playoff Committee pretty much since it started. She's been around the NFL for a long time. Always kind of been at the head of changes in college athletics, in professional football. That's somebody that could be a potential option here. Outside kind of influence, outside hire. I don't know. That's just me spitballing a name, but somebody like that where they might have been around college sports, but in the background. It's not going to be somebody that we know the way, that we recognize their face. I wouldn't expect something like that, especially from a point of kind of coaching staffs. I don't think it's Nick Saban. I don't think it's going to be a former coach, something of that sort, unless they've been out of the game for a long time. And this is going to be a position. It's going to be lucrative. It'll be 7 figures. And it will have significant authority once everything kind of falls into place. All these institutions that are going to join this College Sports Commission, they're going to have new membership agreements that they basically sign saying, hey, we're going to agree to these rules. This is going to be binding. Basically, it's going to be our new enforcement organization. All of the Power 4 schools are going to have to sign it. I would assume Notre Dame is probably included in that as well. But at a minimum, the Power 4 schools are going to have to sign this agreement or risk being left out of this new era. And so the CEO, they're going to have to make sure pretty much everything's enforced, make sure the governance model of this new commission is sound. It's going to be a critically important role for the future of college sports in general, and then college football in particular. There's probably going to be a board. The commissioner or the CEO is expected to report to a board, which most likely would include the Power 4 commissioners as well. Big 10, SEC, 12, ACC. And then they're also probably going to be put in charge of essentially running the systems that have kind of been put in place. The LBI software and the accounting firm Deloitte, they've lined up to kind of handle salary cap management, handle NIL, contracts. All of that stuff is going to fall under this new CEO, under the new commission's kind of authority. And it's going to mark a distinct industry shift. NCAA, they're still going to be around, right? They're still going to deal with issues of academic, like eligibility, getting into schools, those kind of things. And then they'll deal with eligibility stuff. How many years has a certain athlete played? Are they still eligible to play in college sports? They're still going to be around. But in terms of the big kind of cheating, tampering, NIL violations, stuff of that nature, that's going to be for this commission to handle. It's going to be completely different, something we haven't seen before. It's going to be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised. Is this the first step in college football kind of breaking away from the rest of college athletics. If they're under a different organization, a different enforcement body, could that kind of be the first step in them going a completely different route, them leaving the NCAA, saying, hey, we're going to do our own thing? It kind of seems like this is set up to be like that, be something like that. And these new association documents that each member school is going to have to sign, that seems pretty binding. And that could also, I think, be used as sort of a template for a new college football body down the road, where they go, hey, we are completely breaking away from the NCAA. We're going to now be called the College Football League, something like that, right? Could they kind of use these agreements that they're going to have to sign for this new commission as a template, as a way to say, hey, you kind of already signed these. We're pretty much already in the process of breaking away. Let's just do it. Let's form our own thing. I think that's certainly something that's very possible here, something that's very likely to see. It's interesting. So documents that have kind of been circulated around this whole thing, they haven't been finalized, right? They're still in the draft stage. But the draft kind of includes languages on the CEO that says they will make, quote, final factual findings and determinations of violations of rules. And it said they will also, quote, impose such fines, penalties, or other sanctions as appropriate. And then the schools will have to accept these rulings as final. So this guy or woman, whoever's going to be, this CEO is going to be a huge, huge figure in college football. They will have final say on if a school gets banned, if a school has to pay a significant fine, if they have to leave spots off the roster for a certain number of years, if they're out of bowl eligibility for how long. It's all going to come down to this one position. It's something we haven't seen in college football before. It's something that's going to be extremely interesting to kind of see how it all breaks down. And whoever fills this role is going to have a huge responsibility on their shoulders to get it right, to set the foundation of this entire new era of college football. So right now, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about two schools that are still kind of in the old era, but transitioning, in Notre Dame and USC. Could their rivalry be ending? We're going to get into it when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Tuesday, May 20th. Just got into what could happen with this new commission, new CEO. It's going to be interesting. But now we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk a little bit about Notre Dame, USC. Could that be ending? Before I get into that, though, I just want to remind everybody that this show is all about you. We love hearing your comments, your questions, your insights, your opinions. your hot takes, whatever you got, we want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. Now, one easy way to do that, if you're on YouTube, you can use the super chat feature. All you have to do to use the super chat feature is click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, type in your message there, send that in. This will guarantee that your message gets on the air, gets read live, and it's also just a great way to support our channel, support what we're trying to build here at GSMC. We couldn't do what we do. We're so grateful to have you all as a part of our community here. And if Super Chat's not your thing, if you're not on YouTube, you can also go to gsmcpodcast.net to tip, donate, leave a comment there on that website. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you for all that you do to support the GSMC Podcast Network. Now, let's get into one of the classic, historic rivalries in college football throughout the entirety of the sport. Notre Dame, USC could potentially be ending. So when Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bevacqua was asked by Sports Illustrated yesterday on Monday about whether they plan to play annually against the University of Southern California, he said, "I think Southern Cal and Notre Dame should play every year for as long as college football is played, and SC knows that's how we feel." Think about it. This is a rivalry. Two blue bloods, classic programs of college football that have met 95 times since 1924, playing every single year, but the 3 during World War II and during the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. This is a rivalry that has extended 100 years across the nation. But this year, the October 18th game in South Bend is currently, as it's slated, the last one in the current contract of the Notre Dame USC series. Now, USC has offered a 1-year extension to play Notre Dame in Los Angeles again next year in 2026, according to sources that talked to Sports Illustrated. But Notre Dame, they want another long-term deal. And USC Associate Athletic Director Cody Warsham, he talked to Sports Illustrated as well. He said, "We want the USC Notre Dame rivalry to continue, which is why we offered an extension of our agreement. It's a special game to our fans and our institution. We will continue to work with Notre Dame on scheduling feature games." So, USC, despite Cody Warsham's words saying, "We want this to continue, this is a special game for us," they've expressed reluctance to enter into a long-term deal due to uncertainty about the feature college football playoff format, and also while assessing the demands of greater travel as a member of the Big Ten. USC has, however, broached the idea of potentially moving the game to a season opening spot on the schedule in which they would open every year with Notre Dame. I don't mind that, personally. If this series did continue, making it the first game of the season, I don't know, I traditionally view it more as a late year matchup, or mid to late year, but if it means continuing the series, okay, put it as week 1. Wouldn't be a bad idea. Would be an interesting way to get eyeballs to screens. But this is a series where no annual series has more programs with more national title wins at all between the two programs. Notre Dame has won 9 national championships. USC has won 7 since the AP poll began in 1936. And that was when they kind of established a national standard for national champions. If you look at it, these are 2 of the greatest brands in college football history. This rivalry goes back 100 years, basically. Then there's an infamous story where Newt Rockne's wife, allegedly, she convinced her husband that a trip to Southern Cal every 2 years would be a nice little perk. She probably just wanted a vacation. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's a nice little anecdote, though. But since then, they've combined for the most national championships between any annual rivalry series, had 15 Heisman winners, some of the greatest games in college football history. This is one of the best rivalries across the sport, it really kind of be just a rough thing for college football. Not great, Mark. Not a great look if this series was gone. If it went by the wayside completely. And this is something Notre Dame has been extending rivalry series. They just recently agreed to a 12-game home and away agreement with Clemson that's scheduled to begin in 2027. But they don't think this is an impediment to doing something similar to USC. In fact, they kind of want something similar to the Clemson agreement that they just signed. And this is a game where Clemson, Notre Dame, yes, solid rivalry. It's a nice little one that's kind of developed in the past decade or so. Notre Dame, USC. It goes back much longer than I've been alive, longer than my father's been alive, longer than my grandfather has been alive. This is a series that has been played forever. It's one of the classics. It's an East versus West, Midwest versus West, differing styles of football, different weather. Notre Dame, you have to play in the cold, the snow, just nasty weather, especially when it gets to the late season. Then you have Southern California, beautiful, sunny, 70 all the time, right? Different contrasting styles, and that's what makes it so great, is the difference, but the combined greatness of these two programs, two historically proud programs, yes, that have kind of fallen off in certain points, but they're both still there. If you look at, they have two head coaches in Lincoln Riley, Marcus Freeman, who are both entering their 4th seasons there. Yes, Lincoln Riley, under his tenure at USC, they've slid. They went from 11-3 to 8-5 to 7-6 last year, and last year was their first year in the Big Ten, so you can kind of expect an adjustment period, right? Under Marcus Freeman for Notre Dame, they've kind of been on a different trajectory. They've improved from 9-4 to 10-3 to last year 14-2 and a berth in the national championship and the college football playoff. And when you look at their head-to-head matchups, Marcus Freeman 2-1 against Lincoln Riley, winning the last 2, which makes sense when you look at kind of the caliber of teams that these two programs have had in recent years. But this is a series that, look at those two coaches as well. Lincoln Riley is 41, Marcus Freeman 39. If they are both there for a long time, this can be one of the greatest coaching matchups of all time. Think about it. If they both are there, these are two marquee programs, marquee jobs, places you don't just leave, right? They're both going to be around for a long time, especially if Lincoln Riley is able to stay at USC. It could be a coaching rivalry too, not just a program one, a coaching rivalry for the next decade. Something that could go for 10 plus years if there's potential. Then you look at the travel. Okay, USC, I kind of understand what you're saying, right? Yes, with being in the Big Ten, now you have to travel a lot more. But this is something Notre Dame has dealt with for 100 years. Notre Dame has been able to figure it out where they've traveled across the country pretty much every year in football. USC can too. USC is not hurting for finances. This is what that money's for. You can schedule a game across the country. You can travel all the time. It's okay. And you chose to go to the Big Ten. You made your bed, now you have to lie in it. If you wanted to be in the Big Ten, you knew that came with the territory, right? You'd have to travel to Rutgers. You'd have to go to Ohio. You'd have to go to Pennsylvania, right? That just comes with being in the Big Ten, okay? You keep your Notre Dame game. It's same thing. And Notre Dame has dealt with this for much longer than USC has. So it doesn't really make sense of throwing the Notre Dame rivalry game away for a Big Ten opponent. Say you just replace that with, instead of going to Notre Dame, you go to Bloomington, Indiana instead. Pretty much kind of the same distance for USC. Would you rather see USC versus Notre Dame in a marquee rivalry game? Or would you rather see them play Indiana, a team that they have no ties to? A team that, yes, they've been on the rise, but this is not a rivalry. It's not a game that would excite the casual fan, USC Indiana. Whereas USC Notre Dame, it's always going to be up there. It's always going to be one of those top marquee rivalries. Throwing that away for kind of the sake of travel just isn't fair. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's something that, why would you do that for USC? And I understand the conference kind of game argument, right? They have to play 9 Big Ten conference games. That's tough, especially it often adds another high-profile matchup. And then if the Big Ten SEC kind of schedules some kind of agreement, that's going to add another 1 or 2 marquee games to USC schedule. You add Notre Dame on top of that, that's 11 potential marquee matchups. Okay, that's tough. That's going to make that a complicating factor. And that's something that Notre Dame doesn't have to deal with, at least for right now, as an independent. But this is USC. This is a program that's too great, too proud to back down from a challenge. They're top 10 all-time in wins, top 5 in national championships, one of the most famous helmets, marketing teams, one of the most recognizable brands in college football, biggest market in the country. You can't back down from this. You have to maintain this rivalry, keep that proud game going. Just keep the Notre Dame USC matchup. I can understand some of the logistics, but this is a rivalry that's too great to be thrown to the wayside because of some minor issues. So now we're going to take another short break on the show. When we come back, we're going to look at some guys that I think could bounce back after rough 2024 seasons to have great 25 years. But stick with us. We'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Tuesday, May 20th. Just talked a little bit about Notre Dame, USC. If that rivalry ends, I'm going to be pretty upset, not going to lie. But we're going to move on. We're going to talk now about some guys that I think could bounce back after some rough 2024 campaigns. I wrote breakout. I was supposed to write bounce back, but we're going to talk about that. That's all right. We're going to move on. One guy I think is definitely at the top of the list is going to be Carson Beck, quarterback, not of the Georgia Bulldogs, but of the Miami Hurricanes now. This is a guy that, as a first-time starter at Georgia in 2023, really had a terrific season. Completed 72% of his passes, had 9.5 yards per passing attempt, threw for 3,900 yards, had 24 touchdowns, to only 6 interceptions as well. And really only kind of a controversial decision from the College Football Playoff Selection Committee left Georgia out of the Final Four team playoff in 2023. Georgia was really good. Carson Beck was really good too for them. But you go to last year. Last year, not so much. Carson Beck, he really kind of struggled in some marquee matchups, tossed 3 interceptions in losses to Alabama and Texas, also threw a trio of interceptions against Florida, only had 186 passing yards in a loss to Ole Miss and Oxford, and didn't really have a great half against Texas in the SEC championship game before an elbow injury ended his season. Gunnar Stockton came in for the rest of that game and then started against Notre Dame for the Bulldogs. So Carson Beck, this was a kid that really came into 2024 with high expectations, projected first-round draft pick in a lot of really early mock drafts for the 2025 draft. But he's at Miami now. He's got an opportunity to command a different offense. It's going to be more run-heavy, one that's going to have a potentially elite blocking unit. I think this is going to be a really great offensive line for Miami. And as long as this kind of revamped passing unit meshes well, it's going to be a big question for Miami. Had to replace a unit that had a lot of veterans, especially Xavier Restrepo. Kind of brought in a mixture of transfers and young guys to remake that room. It's going to be interesting how the chemistry goes there. But as long as they can kind of mesh, Carson Beck gives them a stable quarterback, an experienced quarterback, and a guy that could really perform better in the ACC with maybe a little less expectations than he did have at Athens. This is a guy that has the talent, really had a great 23 season, struggled last year, but retooling, kind of refocusing, this could really help Carson Beck and could propel him to a strong 2025 season. I think it's certainly very possible. Another guy I'm looking at is Casey Concepcion, wide receiver at Texas A&M now. So this is a guy that's kind of already had an interesting journey. During 2023, breakout star at North Carolina State. He was a freshman then, showed off his versatility, had 71 catches, 839 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, and also had 320 rushing yards, averaging almost 8 yards per carry, and once also throwing a 17-yard touchdown pass. So all of that production made him a second-team All-ACC selection as a freshman. North Carolina goes 9-4 in 2023, as their team performance dipped in 2024 to 6-7. So did Casey Concepcion's. He only had 53 catches, had 460 scores, 6 touchdowns, only managed 36 yards on 19 carries, so didn't have the same success in the backfield either. But now he's at Texas A&M. He's at a place where there's going to be other options. Mario Craver also coming in from Mississippi State, going to help him have some other options there. And the presence of Marcel Reed at quarterback should help them. He's going to be the top target here. He's going to be in a more talented offense in Texas A&M and should have a stronger year. This is a guy that has all the talent in the world. He showcased it as a freshman. Will he kind of be able to come back up to those rankings, to that standing in 2025? I think a lot of it's going to depend on Marcel Reed, on how he performs as the quarterback there for the Aggies. But this is a guy in Casey Concepcion that's a really elite weapon, a guy that can do a lot of different things for the Aggies and should be featured this year. I certainly can see him bouncing back to those 23 levels and having a really strong year for the Aggies. Another guy I'm looking at is Harold Perkins Jr., edge, LSU. Now, this is a kid that, if you turn on his 2022-2023 tape, is an absolute freak. He dazzled as a true freshman in 22, had 73 tackles, 14 of those for loss, also had 8.5 sacks. He carries that into next season, has 2023 numbers of 75 tackles, 13 of those for loss, 5.5 sacks. So kind of dropped off a little bit, but both years, second team All-SEC for kind of that performance. Last year, LSU kind of struggled out of the gate, and they didn't really have a position for Harold Perkins. Kind of didn't know where to play him, how to utilize him. So we kind of struggled through the first month of the season, then tore his ACL, which ended his season in September anyway. Now, Harold Perkins fully healthy. He's going to go move to what LSU calls their star position. It's kind of a hybrid linebacker DB type role. So in theory, this is going to allow him to really have more freedom, kind of as a roaming playmaker, be able to move around the field, do a ton of different things. It's going to make it more difficult also for opponents to block him, to use a lineman to block him downfield instead of a receiver or tight end. So getting those mismatches on the edge where he's able to kind of shed those lighter blockers easily, give him more roaming ability, more plays to make impacts. I think that really is going to help Harold Perkins. It's going to help the LSU defense as well. This is a guy that's got all the talent in the world. I'm excited to see what he can kind of do in this new star position. I'm excited though. Tacario Davis, this is another kid, DB now at Washington. So reunited and hopefully feels like a bounce back season. This is a guy that's the hope this year. In 2023 at Arizona, he was an honorable mention All Pac-12 choice on that Jedd Fisch-led Arizona team. Yielded only 5.4 yards per target in coverage, according to PFF. Then 24, Jedd Fisch goes from Arizona to Washington, and Tacario Davis, along with pretty much everybody else on Arizona's roster, really had it down here. After giving up 5.4 yards per target in 23, gave up 9.3 yards per target this season. So entered the portal after the year, goes to Washington to reunite with Jedd Fisch and his former secondary coach in John Richardson. There's no question that they have a plan to maximize his impact. This is a kid that's a 6'4" cornerback. He's long, he's athletic, he's really talented as a man press corner with natural tools. Sometimes he gets caught peeking, gets out of position, but if this is a guy that cleans up his technique, his ceiling is super high. And reuniting with Jedd Fisch with his secondary coach should really help him clean up his technique. A guy that can get back to that 23 level, a guy that has all the tools in the world. I would expect him to really have a great year for Washington as one of those corners for them. Then another quarterback that I had that I was kind of thinking about is Kaidon Salter. Now, Kaidon Salter, transferring to Colorado after being at Liberty throughout his college career, hasn't officially been named the starter, still technically in competition with Juju Lewis, but this is a kid that's the veteran in the room. He's the favorite right now at this time. As for how he's going to do, it's going to be difficult to figure out. Are they getting the 23 version, or are they getting the 24 version of Kaidon Salter? That's going to be the big question for Colorado. In 2023, 61% completion percentage, 2,800 yards, 32 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, also rushing for 1,000 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns. Then, this past season, 24, 56% completion percentage, 1,800 yards, 15 touchdowns, still 6 interceptions, only 580 yards on the ground, and 7 touchdowns. So, which version will they get? And then, you also got to consider, he's replacing Shedeur Sanders, has Julian Lewis in the background, kind of hovering as that 4-star, 5-star freshman. This is a Colorado team that's got a bunch of eyeballs on them. This is going to be a guy that, can he step up in the spotlight? Going to have more talent around him at Colorado than he did at Liberty. Has a really strong offensive coordinator in Pat Shurmur, a dynamic head coach in Deion Sanders. How will Kaidon Salter do? Will he kind of get back to those levels? Can he regain his confidence, regain that playmaking ability? I think he can. I think this is a guy that really has a strong ceiling and a guy that's experienced but still can get back and learn and kind of develop some of those tools that fell off from last year. But Kaidon Salter, definitely another name to watch out for as a bounce-back candidate for the 2025 season. So we're going to take another short break now. When we come back, we're going to talk about, could there be no more noon Ohio State games? We're going to discuss it when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Tuesday, May 20th. Just talked about some potential bounce-back candidates for this upcoming season. Gonna switch gears. Gonna talk about, could there be no more noon games in Ohio Stadium? That's what members of the Ohio General Assembly want to do. They're very concerned about their football. If you don't know anything about the state of Ohio, it's a football crazy state. That's number one. Football is king. And this is a bill that I think kind of showcases that. So a bill has been introduced in the Ohio State Legislature in the General Assembly to prohibit Ohio State and other state schools, not just Ohio State, from playing most of its home games before 3:30 p.m. So, under the terms of the proposal by Representative Tex Fisher from Boardman, Ohio, games including at least one state school and games including top 10 teams would be prohibited from starting earlier than the mid-afternoon. With one exception, however. Division B of the section does not apply if an earlier start time of a college football game between two teams is a college football tradition. And for that purpose, a college football tradition was defined as a start time of a game between teams of two institutions whose football teams having competed against each other of at least 50 times, and the start time has been the same time for at least 95% of those games. So that provision in general, that's just talking about Ohio State, Michigan. That's pretty clear there. That's an annual rivalry that always is played at noon, so it would exempt that game from being played at noon. However, pretty much every other game in the Ohio State Stadium would not be played at noon if it was a top 10 matchup. This is something that's really interesting. It would affect the Texas-Ohio State game this year, as that's being played at noon right now, but it's something that's kind of interesting. This bill comes with a bunch of consternation among Ohio State fans, pretty much with the Big Ten's media rights contract with Fox. So because of Big Noon Saturday, which Fox debuted that, when they debuted it, it was kind of a way for the network to air a marquee matchup, during what's pretty much kind of a barer early state, traditionally, rather than having to compete with the SEC's long-standing 3:30 game on CBS, which now CBS primarily airs a Big Ten game at 3:30 as part of a new media rights deal with that conference, or having to compete with ESPN's primetime night matchup on ESPN ABC. And they kind of added some pageantry to the pre-show kickoff. They added Big Noon kickoff, kind of doing the same thing that ESPN does with College Game Day. I'm not a fan of Big Noon kickoff. I think it's pretty much a ripoff of College Game Day. It doesn't give the same experience to me. But because of Big Noon Saturday, Fox essentially gets the pick of the conference's top matchup every weekend in the football season. And almost always they place that marquee game of the week in that Big Noon Saturday kind of slot. With other top games around the country later in the day, it just kind of makes sense that they've gotten strong ratings in that slot, so they've continued that matchup. However, this time slot heavily features Ohio State, and it's something that Ohio State fans have hated for years, but 7 of the Buckeyes' 12 regular season games in 2024 were at noon Eastern Time. 6 of those games were at home. That included marquee matchups versus Indiana, Penn State, Michigan, all were on Fox at noon. It's something that's drawn frustration from fans that attend these games for a bunch of reasons, mostly including the inability to tailgate throughout the day. But Fox is a huge reason why Ohio State, why other Big Ten schools get so much money per year. It's kind of hard to see Ohio State, other Big Ten schools trading less TV money for fewer early kickoffs. However, it's kind of fun to speculate about. The bill to ban early kickoffs, it also came just months after a bill was introduced in the Ohio State legislature to ban flag planting at a stadium, which came from Michigan's flag planting display after they beat Ohio State this year, 13-10 in Ohio Stadium in Columbus. Ohio State, obviously, they got the final laugh. They won the national championship, but that bill came right after that game. So this is something that, hey, Ohio representatives, I guess, just really like their Ohio State football. If somehow this bill got passed, the Ohio Attorney General would slap a $10 million fine against either the host team's athletic conference or the television network that was broadcasting the game, whichever party scheduled the earlier start time. That was the language in the actual bill. So, essentially, if Ohio State had, look at the Texas matchup, right? This is going to be a top 10 matchup in that noon slot. This bill, essentially, if it was passed, the Attorney General would fine either the Big Ten or Fox here for this matchup. I don't know how this would be enforced, frankly, but it's kind of something that's fun to speculate on, I think, a little bit. Ohio State fans, they do have kind of a legitimate gripe. They have played 35 noon games since the start of the 2019 season, including those 7 last year on their way to the national championship. Last season, each of Ohio State's final 6 regular season home games began at noon, 3 of those coming at home. And this is something that's just kind of interesting. Of note, last year in 24, there was only one home game that would have fallen under this criteria, which was the November 23rd meeting with Indiana, a game where Ohio State and Indiana were both ranked in the top 5. Ohio State was 2, Indiana was 5. And then Ohio State only played one other top 10 team in the noon slot, which was against Penn State. However, that was on the road, so a little bit different. But I don't know. Ohio seems to really love their Ohio State football. And hey, maybe there's a MAC matchup down the road where Bowling Green is a top 10 team and they play somebody, and that falls under this category. When I first saw the kind of headlines, that's what my question was how would this enforce, I guess, across all institutions? Because it doesn't really make sense to limit the other state schools being, OU, Miami, Toledo, Akron, Kent State, Bowling Green. If those schools couldn't play at noon, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me just because there's not as much flexibility in those schedules. But the way they've kind of written it in, it pretty much makes it seem like this is just a bill for Ohio State. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. I think this is a bill that shouldn't pass, most likely. Even if it did, I don't know how it's really enforceable for Ohio or for the Attorney General. How would they enforce this against the Big Ten, against Fox? I'm not sure. I don't really think they would probably be able to, but it's kind of fun to just speculate about and think of, hey, maybe this could actually happen. If it did, though, would it actually affect Fox moving them? Would they move Ohio State off of that noon slot just because of this fine, even though Ohio State most likely would draw the most eyeballs for their TV ratings for that noon slot? Would that fine, the potential fine, be enough for Fox or for the Big Ten to move off of Ohio State in one of those primetime slots on Big Noon Saturday? I don't know. I probably doubt it would. I think the TV ratings would most likely trump whatever this fine would be from the Ohio Attorney General, but I'm not sure. Maybe it would force Fox or the Big Ten to move off of Ohio State, and maybe a matchup of Ohio State, Indiana, something like that. Maybe they move that to later in the day. I don't know. I kind of would doubt that. I think if Ohio State's there, if there's a home game in Ohio Stadium where it's a marquee matchup, there's no way Fox isn't putting them in that primetime slot for them, which is that noon slot. I just don't think that would make a lot of sense from Fox's point of view. But this was a little fun segment I just kind of wanted to speculate about. We're going to take another short break now. When we come back, we're going to finish with a continuation of my SEC rankings, kind of that middle tier of the conference, and where I think those schools are. But stick with us. We'll be right back on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Tuesday, May 20th. Gonna finish off by continuing my SEC rankings. So I did the bottom tier of the conference today. Gonna start at number 10. I think it's Auburn. Now, Auburn, they definitely have the talent to compete this year. There's no more excuses for Hugh Freeze. You can't blame Brian Harsin, his staff, on any more shortcomings. There's been enough time to get your guys in, to recruit who you want from Hugh Freeze. There's been enough time to remake this roster, to rebuild it in his image. So, this is go time for Auburn, right? This is when Hugh Freeze really needs to kind of step up. They've completely remade pretty much the entire roster, and that includes taking a swing on former Oklahoma quarterback Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold really kind of struggled in year one in the SEC at Oklahoma, showed flashes of brilliance with Oklahoma at times, but really never kind of reached that level befitting of a player of his status, right? This is a kid that was former 5-star quarterback, super high expectations, a really big win for Oklahoma at the time when he committed, but never really kind of got everything to click, never kind of showcased that next level. So now you're working with Hugh Freeze, a guy that's kind of been known to really develop strong quarterback play. Maybe Hugh Freeze can develop that next level. Maybe he can get Jackson Arnold to that next spot. If he does, Auburn's going to finish higher on this list than I have them. The pieces are in place elsewhere. The D-line's pretty stacked. Jamonte Waller, there's a couple other guys, a couple different places where Auburn has really strong players. I love their wide receiver room and Eric Singleton Jr., Cam Coleman. I'm really high on those two guys. But this is a team, a program. The pieces are in place at other positions, at other spots. Can Jackson Arnold put it all together and lead Auburn back to prominence in the SEC, back to relevance? That's a big question mark. It's going to be on his shoulders pretty much for this upcoming year. Now, another team with kind of question marks around quarterback that they weren't expecting is Tennessee. Tennessee I have ranked one higher than Auburn. They're number 9 on my list. And obviously, the big key here is the whole Nico Yamaleva situation that played out throughout the spring. That saga really kind of overshadowed some of the other issues that Tennessee is plagued with currently, mostly on the offensive side of the ball. There's no Dylan Sampson. Mind you, Dylan Sampson, 2024 Offensive Player of the Year in SEC. No Dylan Sampson in the running back room. No standout wide receivers, really. Square White's gone. A couple other guys are gone. Offensive line, really lacking quality depth. Defense, they're going to be okay again. They should be among the best in the SEC. Even if Jermon McCoy is kind of working his way back from that torn ACL, this is still a really solid defensive unit for Tennessee. But I don't know, just with the offensive issues, question marks on that side of the ball, I don't know if they're a college football playoff contender again this year. I don't really see them kind of reaching that status. I think there's too many question marks, especially on offense. We don't know what Joey Aguilar is going to look like either after he comes in to replace Nico Yamaleva. We're not really sure. Defense is going to be solid. Offense is going to be an unknown. Tennessee, could they get back? It's certainly possible. I just don't know. I think there's too many question marks this year to have them ranked any higher right now. Another team with question marks at times is Texas A&M. I have Texas A&M slightly above Tennessee right now. I think they're that number 8 team in the SEC. But this is a really tough team to figure out. A lot of their hopes kind of hinge on Marcel Reed, if he can develop into what they think he can be, kind of showcase it at times, but we don't know if Marcel Reed can develop into that next tier of quarterback. Right now, he's kind of been middling for them. And this is an A&M team that they're really talented across the board. They also put a lot of effort into upgrading pretty much everybody around Marcel Reed. Wide receivers coming in, Mario Craver, Mississippi State, was their number 1 wideout. I talked about KC Concepcion earlier in the show, but those were A-plus additions in the transfer portal. Also, they have an experienced offensive line, so that kind of coupled with the wide receiver room really gives Marcel Reed the platform, the position to be put in to succeed. Will he take it and run with it? Will he be able to capitalize on everything around him? This is a super talented Texas A&M team. That hasn't been the issue the past multiple seasons. Is they've been talented across the board, but quarterback play has held them back. They're going to need Marcel Reed to be a guy for them. Can he do that? I don't know. I kind of have question marks around that idea. I don't know if he can develop into that next level kind of star. It's certainly there. I just don't know if I see it happening. I think this is a Texas A&M team that, again, they're going to show flashes of why they can be great. They have the talent there. They're going to beat a team or two that they shouldn't, but then they're probably going to lose a game or two that they shouldn't. I think they're going to be inconsistent. I think we're going to see how talented they are at times, and then other cases, we're going to see what's been holding them back, namely quarterback play. I think Marcel Reed is probably going to be a little inconsistent again this year, and that could be another theme for the 2025 Texas A&M Aggies. Now, the team I have ahead of them also kind of has quarterback questions, but in a different sort of way. I think Florida is the number 7 team in the SEC, and there's certainly an argument to be made that Texas A&M, Tennessee, that those are better programs than Florida. I'm a believer in Florida, though. This is a program that's really talented, really deep. DJ Lagway can be a Heisman contender. That's not hyperbole. He certainly can and should be a Heisman contender if he kind of plays up to the standard that he set for himself last year. 6-1 as a starter in 2024. A guy that has all of the physical tools needed to consistently kind of produce highlight reel level plays. A guy that's a stronger passer than people realized too. A young kid last year, gonna have another year of experience. One big question mark with him though is he was pretty much out almost all of spring, wasn't throwing the football, is now back to throwing the football. That's a really big plus for Florida because if DJ Lagway's not playing, this is a team that's gonna have some issues. They do have to replace Shamir DK, Elijah Badger, but Eugene Wilson III, UCLA transfer J. Michael Sturdivant, those are really capable replacements, guys that can lead that wide receiver room for the Gators. It also helps that this is one of the SEC's most battle-tested rosters. They have veterans like Jake Slaughter at center, Tyreek Sapp, edge rusher, Caleb Banks at D-line, that all chose to not go to the draft, forego that, come back to Gainesville for a final year. That's really big bonus. This is going to be another tough schedule for Florida. But I think they can pump up to the task. Their 5 losses last year were against top 25 teams. They probably have another 7 or 8 teams on their schedule this year that could be ranked at certain points of the season. But I think Florida, they're going to have enough talent with the continued improvement of DJ Lagway. I think they even win a couple more games than they did last year. I could see this being an 8 or 9 win Florida team with some really impressive wins. They're deep, they're talented, they're going to be a lot of fun to watch, especially if DJ Lagway can kind of develop into what everybody believes he can be. So with that, we are going to end our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to like, subscribe, follow the channel, and if you want, you can also go to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter for even more sports content, more sports updates that you love. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to